We waited years for Epic Games to release an official first-person mechanic in Fortnite. The speculation, the hype, the potential, every Fortnite creator was talking about it across every forum. Then, in December of 2024, Epic Games would finally announce Ballistic, Fortnite's own tactical first-person mode, and along with it, an official first-person camera tool in Creative. With years of waiting now over, creators finally had the power to add a first-person camera to their red vs. blue maps. But those aren't the maps we're talking about today, because I dug deep into the trenches of Fortnite Creative to find some of the best and worst first-person maps the community has to offer. But that's not all. Today I wanted to do something even bigger. So in this video, I'll also be designing and modeling my very own first-person arena map to take you through the process and talk a bit candidly about my struggles along the way. Before we get into that though, let's check out the maps the community has already cooked up. For those of you that also grew up with old-school pixelated arena shooters like Quake and Unreal Tournament, you'll likely feel right at home in PixelShock Arena. This fast-paced map rotates players through several different arenas and game modes, from classics like Shoddy Snipes to the more modern Mammoth One-Shot. If you're used to the traditional Fortnite movement, you won't find that here. Instead, the custom movement mechanics make players feel like they're gracefully sliding, jumping, and dashing through the map at Mach 10. At first, you're likely going to be smashing your face into the walls like Sonic learning to run for the first time. But once you get used to it, it's addictingly smooth, especially with a higher DPI to match. A fully custom UI, round graphics, and of course the overall pixelated art style helps this one stand out as well. So I highly recommend checking this one out. I've covered other Call of Duty style Fortnite maps in the past, so it's no surprise there's plenty of new ones popping up with the new first-person camera device. But one of my favorite ones so far is Rave Zombies from King Bertram. This map has many of the classic zombie staples from Call of Duty while still feeling like it belongs in Fortnite. And for those of you looking for Easter eggs, there's plenty of those to find here as well, but you're going to need a keen eye to figure them out. Or you can just give up and call on the map designer himself to help you do it like I did. As per his request though, I won't spoil everything here, but all I'll say is Bertram did a great job on this map. And if you want more zombies maps like this, I also recommend checking out his map Zombies in California, which is actually supposed to be a sequel to Rave if you follow the little tidbits of lore he's laid out. If you've watched my channel before, you'll know that I usually won't touch a traditional only up map with a 10-foot pole. They're repetitive, frustrating, and usually about as polished as your grandma's feet. So when a member of my Discord community announced that they just finished their only fall first-person map, I was ready to give my brutally honest review that probably would have ended with something like, I'd rather fall off the roof of my own house than play this only fall map for another second. But to my surprise, I actually had fun. First off, perspective-wise, falling just feels better than climbing in first person, and I never felt like I failed a jump because I misjudged the hitbox in my face. I also didn't have to rely on the notoriously unreliable mantling as much as I'm used to having to do in a regular only up. Now, I wouldn't say this is the most challenging map, especially due to the checkpoints that double as nifty health packs, but for those of you that don't want to use them, there's a quick reset button next to each of them that allows you to start right back at the top. I also really enjoyed the added level of strategy that came from deciding whether or not it was worth it to break your knees a little bit to drop past a couple levels. It's extra things like that that make speedrunning these types of maps a lot of fun. I can promise you though, I won't be the one setting a new record on this map. Despite mostly talking about their super red vs. blue map, Mustard Plays and Typical Gamer have been cooking up a number of other maps, including our next entry, First Person Gun Game One Shot. The rather straightforward name explains this one pretty well, as you can imagine, but what I really want to highlight here is the map design. Set in a rundown warehouse complex, the team over at Jogo struck the perfect balance between tight interiors for close quarters combat and wide open rooftops for vertical shootouts. The map feels somewhat large, but with only a max of 8 players, it didn't feel like we were ever spending too much time searching for each other. While most of the gun game maps we tested out got boring fairly quick, we could have easily played this one for quite a while. Sticking with the gun game theme here, we've got FPS OPS Gun Game up next. Despite gun game being in the title, there was actually several different modes to vote on in this map, as well as a few different arenas. The first thing you probably noticed here was the body cam style POV. Despite personally getting used to it after a while, it was definitely not a fan favorite in our play group, making some folks feel a little motion sick. Specifically, we agreed the VHS overlay was a fun addition, but we could have all done without the fisheye lens effect. They also added in a fun little death animation that plays well into the whole body cam style, but after seeing it for the 10th time in a row, I was already sick of it. Anything that simply adds to the amount of time it takes for a player to get back into the actual gameplay is likely to quickly lose its charm and become a nuisance. The same thing goes for the whole end of round process. You have to review the scoreboard, then look at your player rewards, then vote, then wait for the next round to start. It's not the slowest turnaround time I've seen, but it definitely adds up. Despite all that, I think this one is still worth trying out. Up next, I actually want to highlight a developer, DriftingLights. He's a proud Creative 1.0 developer who's been pumping out themed arena-style shooter maps for quite a while, and has recently added a first-person option to most of his maps. Since UEFN came out, I've been mostly searching for maps that push the boundaries of what we've come to expect from Fortnite Creative. Looking for things that almost feel nothing like Fortnite, just to see what's possible. But playing through some of the maps from DriftingLights really reminded me of the fun things people can still create with basic creative tools. There's nothing flashy to these maps, and in a way it's kind of refreshing. These remind me of the weird random map ideas ideas me and my friends used to come up with back in the day on games like TimeSplitters 2 or even the Tony Hawk Pro Skater series. For instance, the developer told me this particular map was inspired by a random play session with a friend who kept spamming quarter forks, and they ended up spending more time playing on the random jungle gym of builds it made than doing anything else on the map. So we decided to embrace the chaos and make a whole map based around it. So if you're up for embracing some old school creative vibes while still trying out the new first person mechanic, search up DriftingLights and give some of his maps a try. Taking a break from arena shooters and gun games for a moment, I want to highlight one of the most unique maps on this list, Escape, Lost in Traps. I'll keep my review of this one short though, as I don't want to spoil too much. As some of you might know, I'm a big fan of the 1997 Canadian sci-fi horror film Cube starring David Hewlett from Stargate Atlantis. This map is yet another unrelated entry in a series of maps that seemingly pay homage to this cult classic film. Work your way through a series of seemingly infinite connected rooms, each filled with different deadly puzzles and traps for you to survive. Good luck and Godspeed. I'll meet you at the end. Now, every time I make one of these videos, there's always at least a couple people in the comments recommending I check out some kind of horror map that I've never heard of before. So in an effort to appease them, I'll include the one decent first-person horror map that I could find. Split Horror First Person. Split plays out less like a game and more of an experience. You choose from 3 different short stories that are likely going to be really hard for you to understand if you forgot to change the language at the beginning like I did. But luckily my partner here was smart enough to change it, so I forced him to narrate the whole thing for me. Each story is a self-contained interactive horror movie. If you're willing to let yourself really get immersed in them, they were actually a little spooky, and I felt the overall concept was pretty novel. I would definitely love to see more narrative-focused maps like this in the future. Now that we've got the good maps out of the way, it's time to run through some of the other oddities we wasted our time on. Sticking with the horror theme, let's talk about Pigeon Horror, a ridiculous map that wouldn't leave my recommended feed until I finally caved and dragged my Discord group in to play it. I'm very sorry I did this to you all. The map is a collection of random fever dreams and confusing jump scares that you're forced to experience in slow motion for the sake of padding the runtime. I thought that having most of the rooms boil down to little more than having to search every corner for the thing that opened the door had wasted enough of my time, but I guess the developer thought that we might be having too much fun, so they really had to slow that shit down. I'm falling asleep watching this footage back, so let's move on. Hunt the Werewolf started off fairly promising with the premise of trying to survive in a dark forest while searching for gear to eventually hunt down the werewolf. The word I really want to emphasize there though is eventually, because it nearly took 20 minutes of actively searching around the map before we finally ran into the werewolf. At which point he hit one person, swallowed a few hundred bullets to the face without taking any damage, and then ran off never to be seen again. You're supposed to be able to use this heartbeat tracker to know if he's close, but it never moved even when I was right next to the guy. You can also collect 24 different runes hidden throughout the map to unlock a werewolf tracker, but I shouldn't have to collect rocks like a 6-year-old on a nature hike just to be able to reliably do the one thing your map promised that I could do from the start. On the flip side of this issue, we have Kong Horror, which starts players off with a 30-second staring contest between you and this random commando before Kong finally says it's time to play. At which point you're sent out into this very strangely lit and quite frankly difficult to look out excuse for a rainforest in search of the angry ape himself. Upon finding him though, the real disappointment sinks in because despite the menacing music emitting from his face, Kong offers zero threat. Even after he suddenly swallows the fucking sun, he's still not powerful enough to leave a scratch. So you're left to enjoy the horrors of his surprisingly detailed ass for as long as you'd like. Once you're done doing that though, you can enjoy the wonders of endless terrible remakes of popular maps from other FPS games. Like this remake of The Pit from Halo, where you move like a retired Spartan with arthritis who never cleans up his toys after he dies. Or maybe you'd like to enjoy the several different renditions of old Counter-Strike maps like Dust 2, or this version of Office that's full of infinitely spawning Christmas bots. And of course we can't forget my personal favorite, 007 First Person, which is based on an Egyptian tomb map that I don't recall ever existing in a 007 game, especially not with this giant pit to hell in the middle, but maybe I just forgot that one. Now that we've taken a look at what the community has cooked up, it's finally time to put my money where my mouth is and design my own map. Hey, it's Editor Dave from the future. I originally started writing this portion of my script as soon as I began conceptualizing and designing my map. I had detailed the whole process about being inspired by the nostalgic maps from TimeSplitters 2 I remembered playing as a kid, wanting to integrate in a bit of realism from the likes of Call of Duty while still keeping that goofy Fortnite vibe somehow. And while all of that sounded really good at the start, it's not at all where I ended up. And that's mostly because of this fun little acronym here. If you struggle with ADHD, you know it has a tendency of destroying even the best laid plans. Usually because you got distracted and started 18 other plans on top of that first one, and now you can't remember what you were doing in the first place. So I've decided to throw out my original script and simply show you a bit of my design process in the background while I talk about my struggles with making a map with ADHD and how I eventually learned to embrace it. So let's jump in. Here's how my creative map making process usually works. I start by excitedly building out the first thing that came to mind when I originally conceptualized the map. In this case, it was this spiral stair building. From there, I kind of let my mind wander as I fill in some secondary structures to frame everything out, and then usually find some kind of random idea to obsess over that inevitably sidetracks a project for an entire day. In this case, it was that I decided I wanted a UFO to have crashed in the middle of my map. I, of course, decided to model the whole thing myself with no idea of how to do this, but I eventually got something that I liked. But this UFO concept became the new obsession because now I had to figure out what I wanted to have it crashed into. So of course I had to to start modeling all the fine details of this fountain, despite the fact that I hadn't even figured out what the rest of the map was going to be. This fountain, by the way, won't even get finished. I'm going to eventually remove it entirely at the very end. Then I thought it would be cool if the UFO released a virus that infected players over time, so of course I had to go try to learn verse to figure out how to create that, but that only led me down another rabbit hole of discovering all the other really cool tools that I wanted to learn in UEFN. And this cycle continuously repeats itself, only being broken when I eventually forget what all these tiny little side projects were adding up to in the first place. Now, this isn't the first time one of my maps got sidetracked like this. In fact, I would say I'm notorious for getting halfway through a map design, coming up with a totally different idea I suddenly like better at the moment, and then entirely switching gears to that. If I'm being completely honest, if I wasn't making this map for a video, I would have already done that. And I know because one day I did stop in the middle of designing it to start writing characters and dialogue for a different concept I had. That's actually a lie. I was writing stuff for 2 different concepts. So how did I end up addressing this problem? Well, in the case of this map, I eventually decided to try and funnel my random thoughts into specific areas. I would tell myself that this was the area that I needed to complete today, so any idea that popped into my head was going into its design. I gave myself the freedom to delete and add whatever I wanted in that area, but I couldn't stop or change areas until it was done, or at least close to it. Did this work perfectly? No, but it eventually got shit done. It was finally getting me to focus on completing the damn map. No matter what I ended up with, a part of me could confidently say the map was finished, and then I was free to let my brain obsess over the minor details. Is this the map I had originally envisioned? No, not even close. But I think it's fun, and it's out, and you can go play it right now, and that's not something I can say about 90% of the maps that I've worked on in the last year. So I'll consider that a win. That's all, folks. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to play this map, the code is on screen now. And a big thank you to my Discord community for creating a number of the other maps I featured today and playing a bunch of them with me. So if you want to find more fun maps like this yourself or have me check out one that you made, go join my Discord. Link is in the description. Anyway, bye.